Reflections on Change, the Transformative Power of Ethics Education, a Case Study of Vietnam by Anh Tho Andres. Summary. The modern nation-state of Vietnam has undergone many changes. Some were adaptable, while others are increasingly more complex due to wars and disruptions during the early half of the 20th century. This paper analyzes the causes and effects of change and its impact on our traditions, values, beliefs, and ethics in the modernization process. Reflections on Change highlights the critical role of government policies in integrating Vietnamese education into the global economy in line with the needs of the country's development. Introduction. Among Asian countries that have successfully integrated Western education into their post-colonial modernization process, the case of Vietnam is an excellent example of this transformation. From an agrarian-based community with deeply rooted Eastern traditions until early 20th century, this young nation has become a vibrant and modern nation with enormous potential for development by the mid-70s. Success factors included a paradigm change in the new Western-type educational policy that integrated the use of the national script and a new sense of patriotism that had its roots from a long tradition of Eastern values. In the early phase of modernization, Cochinchina was a French colony after long centuries of the Han Nom tradition of learning. With the introduction of the national language or Quốc ngữ, in parallel with the implementation of the French curriculum in the southern part of Vietnam, was the most significant factor that increased the literacy rate and encouraged more independent and creative thinking away from the rigid Chinese scripted literature. Thanks to this introduction, Vietnamese people could communicate better in their own language and share their life experiences with more heartfelt emotions. The patriotic sentiment that arose thereof was a sense of belonging, combined with new ideas on democracy, freedom, and equality. French philosophers and thinkers such as Rousseau and Victor Hugo were the first social-oriented schools of thought that shaped Vietnamese youth of the pre-war period between 1932 to 1945 and the generations thereafter. During the post-colonial period, 1945 to 1975, the new nation had to rebuild a system of education that served the needs for learning of a more significant part of the population, characterized by two main trends, the old school and the new school. While the old school or traditionalists in Vietnamese Cựu học recommended keeping Eastern values and resisting modernity, one could see that apart from the three-religion tradition or Tam giáo, the new school or Tân học in Vietnamese was more enthusiastic about new ideas and new worldviews, namely humanism and Christianity. These ideas strongly influenced the transformation of modern Vietnamese system of beliefs, primarily through modern philosophy and literature studies. Typical pioneers of the new school trend were scholars who received a hybrid education and left a strong blueprint of their thinking on the history of education in modern Vietnam. Among them were Trần Trọng Kim and Đào Duy Anh, who significantly contributed to integrating the Vietnamese spirit into the current school concept. In addition, Trương Vĩnh Ký and Nguyễn Hiến Lê were instrumental in teaching new ways of learning classic and modern works in literature and philosophy of both Eastern and Western traditions. In the postmodern period of post-war Vietnam, since the Doi Mai policy in 1986, new skills were necessary to meet the needs of going global. Apart from language and IT literacy, competencies such as critical thinking, effective communication, linguistics, pedagogy, and life skills add to the challenges of modern teaching. Indeed, with the globalized trend, the competition for resources between countries becomes increasingly urgent and are sources of conflict that escalate with the power struggle between modern states. Therefore, educating the masses for survival is no more the task of some bureaucrats or nationalist leaders. Educating citizens for peaceful cohabitation on a global scale has become the agenda of all nations to prepare future citizens who share common values. From this perspective, Vietnamese teachers need to work hand in hand with international peers to define what are these common values applied in the local context. Notions such as culture and subculture, intercultural, cross-culture, cultural diversity, values and traditions help to answer on what is culture, what is cultural heritage, what is the role of literature in culture, how do faith and spirituality shape people of the same culture, how do religion and philosophy interact, how do people of different cultures interact with each other, what is the meaning of diversity, what is inclusiveness, etc., etc. Reflecting on the term change means trying to answer questions such as how changes affect us as Vietnamese individuals, as a community, and as a nation. What is so characteristic about the perception of change in the Vietnamese context? And last but not least, how do we manage change in the globalized context as a nation? The spiritual dimensions of change. With modernization, commerce, and migration come other worldviews imported through Christianity since late 19th century and other ideologies such as communism and liberalism since mid-20th century, followed by globalism in early 21st century. The change brought upon the Vietnamese society through different historical contexts had significantly disrupted the thousand-year-old traditions of the agro-based cultures of the East. However, in modern times, Vietnamese are not conscious of the boundaries between these three philosophical concepts of the changes in their way of celebration and worshipping, nor are they aware of the change in their way of interacting with family members, colleagues, or neighbors in their everyday life. What is remarkable about this transformation is the desire for a peaceful coexistence despite the ideological schism that shook the intelligentsia of the pre-war period. According to Đào Duy Anh, the entre-deux-guerres Vietnamese society was composed of three trends. Number one, the new school or phái Tân học, represented by Trương Vĩnh Ký, Nguyễn Văn Vĩnh, Nguyễn Hiến Lê, adopts the modernization process by a complete renovation of the educational system according to the French model. Number two, in particular, the old school or phái Thủ Cựu, represented by Phan Khôi, Phan Bội Châu, and Trần Trọng Kim, has greatly influenced by many generations of artists, songwriters, educators, and politicians alike. In between, the midway school, phái Trung Dung, represented the majority, the relativists, who adopted a midway philosophy typical of the three-religion tradition. Adopting the Tam Giáo or three-religion tradition, combining the wisdom of Zen Buddhism, Taoism, and Confucianism, is a position most Vietnamese would take in times of change. About the Tao or Dao in Vietnamese. Tao is an ancient concept introduced in the early days of civilization and is part of the gems of the Eastern philosophies. Taoist sages built their attitude on the idea of Tao as an absolute, essential, without form or name, mysterious and indescribable truth. According to Taoist concept, people can achieve a perfect life without excessive effort, stress, and anxiety. Since ancient times, Taoists adopted to live in harmony with the Tao or the Way, Dao in Vietnamese. They integrated into their celebration rituals that drew cosmological concepts of yin-yang principles. They interpreted phenomena that affected their lives according to the I Ching Book of Change or Kinh Dịch to cultivate themselves following the alternating cycles of nature. In practice, the Taoist philosophy can be manifest in the form of feng shui or geomancy for a harmonious balance between the positive and negative energy for healthy living and longevity, including Zen meditation practice combined with Buddhist mantra for clarity of the mind and positive thinking. Tao practice In practice, the Taoist philosophy can be manifest in the form of feng shui or geomancy for a harmonious balance between the positive and negative energy for healthy living and longevity, including Zen meditation practice combined with Buddhist mantra for clarity in the mind and positive thinking. Tao practices in the cult of deities are similar to the Vietnamese ancestral worship celebrations that combine paying respect to Buddha as well as self-cultivation on moral and ethical behavior and showing gratitude to spiritual mentors and living in harmony between siblings.